I actually just feel like.
And it was also right around that period that I was more determined to come out as gay, and one of the things I noticed once I was an out gay person was that I felt marginalized in a lot of leftist political scenes. This is now like the period 86, 87. And also AIDS had become a big public crisis, health crisis in the US. And we had a president who wouldn't even utter the word AIDS. And we had a government that seemingly was indifferent to what at the time was initially a lot of gay men dying. And they wouldn't respond to this crisis because they didn't care if gay men died. And then when it started to be a lot of gay men and black people in this country, they still didn't respond because, and it became pretty clear that this was a very politicized disease where the homophobes and right-wing jerks were using HIV and AIDS as a way to put down marginalized populations, including gay men, of which I was part of. And so I found that, like a lot of the lefty political things I was involved in, that crash, boom, AIDS hit. I found that a lot of people were like tentative about embracing gay people. I went out to a protest at the Nevada nuclear weapons test site where the U.S. in the 80s was still testing nuclear weapons, and on Western Shoshone land that they had never agreed to fully cede in the Treaty of 1868, and the Shoshone have been trying to get their land back and don't want these nuclear detonations poisoning the land and gearing up for war. And I went out to this protest there as a very openly gay activist, and I kind of got freaked out because there must have been 1,000 of us camped in the desert for about a week together, and I couldn't visibly spot many gay people, and so I was back to that feeling I had as a kid of like not finding myself able to fit in. And I took a piece of cardboard and painted a pink triangle and wore it, and I helped serve a meal, and on my pink triangle I wrote, I don't know what I wrote, like gay caucus meeting, dinner tomorrow or something, to try and find other queer people that I could feel a little less freaked out by the straightness of the event. And a number of the peace activists were kind of offended that I was looking for gay people. They're like, this isn't a gay issue, there's nuclear weapons. And so, but I didn't, I put up with that. It wasn't that horrible. The point wasn't to educate people who were homophobic. The point was to find other gay people I could be comfortable with and form some kind of affinity group with, which I did. And that became a theme of a lot of things going on for me in the 80s, where I was involved in a lot of activism, and I felt like a lot of gay people didn't seem to really care about these important issues, like the fact that the U.S. bombed El Salvador, and at the time that was the largest aerial bombing in Western Hemisphere history. And I didn't see many gay people at any of the protests. They weren't at the sit-ins. They weren't speaking out about it usually. But then at the same time, I saw how a lot of the people doing it were not quite so sure that they could totally embrace gay people if they're openly gay. And it was kind of a mind fuck. And I was determined to find some way to bridge some of that in my life, because I wasn't quite fitting into any one scene. And then I got involved in ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, and started going to doing AIDS organizing and AIDS demonstrations, and also volunteering at a AIDS service organization in Washtenaw County, where I lived in Ann Arbor. And definitely it was really exciting to find ACT UP, because it was really exciting to find like kind of radical, militant, queer, mostly queer people, not only queer people, to do activism with. I realized through being involved in many different activist projects and community projects that while I was having trouble kind of fitting in any one place, that it was starting to come together for me, a realization that I wanted a place where I could put all the elements together of who I was, and I think to a large degree I found a lot of that through the Radical Fairies, by going to gatherings. I helped form a Radical Fairy political satire theater troupe, and spent pretty much 3 years living on the road, writing and performing queer political satire and comedy all throughout the United States and Northern Europe. Community brought together creativity, activism, and community. And I felt like, as a political activist, like being kind of like angry, screw you, we're right, you're wrong, we're right, you're wrong, this is how it is. Like I was real annoyed with a lot of act up tactics. In a way, I felt like the anger really brought us together and kept people alive, literally. Kept some people with AIDS alive because they didn't have medications, but they had determination. And but sometimes it all felt like a big cliche to me. I was like, how do we change the hearts and minds, get people to open up to what we're saying? If we're right, you're wrong, you know. And I sort of started to feel like theater and humor had a power to do that. I was really interested in anarchist writing and thoughts, and I read a book that Emma Goldman wrote about theater, and she talked about how she felt like theater had the greatest capacity to change people's minds. And as a lecturer, Emma Goldman lectured a lot about theater. She'd like break down plays and look at George Bernard Shaw or Henrik Ibsen and talk about the radical visions and power of the theater, and how when audience watch these things, they're moved, and that helps shift the culture. And I was real excited to read some of her essays and speeches about theater, because I found that I'm kind of having more fun and have more potential to be engaged with people by theatrics. And I somewhere along the way I joined a street theater group in Ann Arbor called the Pinkerton Theater Group, and their motto was kind of like, you'd go to them and they'd say, okay, you want to be involved in our street theater group? And oh yeah, okay, what's your experience as an actor? Well, not much really. Okay, you're in. And they were kind of a little scared of having too many actors, because they wanted the passion, not the professionalism of skill. I got trained, I really got schooled in performance through political street theater, and even though they joked about how it wasn't about the skill, I could see that the people with the skills were much more effective in engaging people in guerrilla theater style performance. And when I hooked up with the Radical Fairies and found other people like to perform, I realized that was a great outlet for my creativity and political activism. And we decided to tour the country and wrote a number of plays and skits and did shows in the US, Europe, and eventually Canada and Israel too. And that was really good. And one thing that happened was I really fell in love with a Danish theater group. It was a gay theater group, and we talked to them about collaborating, and they were really excited, and we were going to move to Denmark, and we had an amazing director lined up there and everything, and there's a lot more supports for the art in Denmark than there were in the United States or is now. And so it all was falling into place, except that then a lot of people either got AIDS or had AIDS and died, and the whole project fell apart, and I was lost, didn't know what to do with myself, and pretty really sad to see these friends get sick and die, and also because our theater project with all the funding we were planning on getting fell apart. I needed to earn some money, and I came back to the States to earn money, I also had come back to set up the U.S. part of the tour we were going to do with our Danish friends. And when that fell apart, I focused on earning money, and then kind of realized that I was really burned out of living on the road so much, performing, and also having so many friends die. And that was about when I heard that this community called IDA was forming in Tennessee near Short Mountain, and I decided, well, I should at least go help put in a garden. My friend Sandy, actually at Short Mountain, is like, why don't you go help start this community that's starting nearby? And I was like, well, I'll go over and check it out, and pack my bags, and now 15 years later I'm still at IDA.